Is there a decline for the Democratic Party?
The question is, are the Democrats on their way down? The Democratic Party is a party that attempts to create an electoral majority through a politics of ethnic mobilization. So the Democratic Party, at the end of the day, is not going to win or lose based on whether it's right. It's going to win or lose based on whether or not it can mobilize sufficiently to create an electoral majority. This is where Trump kind of surprised them. Now let's pause for a moment to see what Trump did. Working class voters have been a natural part of the old Democratic Party base. FDR won the working class vote, black and white, decisively. For the last 30 years, working class whites have been in the balance, with Republicans appealing to them on social issues and Democrats appealing to them on economic issues. And for this reason, the white working class would swing either way, but was, in a sense, naturally more Democratic than Republican. The political ingenuity of Trump was to appeal to this group on economic and social issues both.
Yes.
He was the first Republican to do this. And he sort of pried away. That's why he won Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And literally, if you watch the State of the Union,
Wisconsin.
Trump's emphasis on bringing jobs, I mean, when he says things like, Chrysler's bringing jobs back to Michigan, the significance of that can't be lost.
It's huge.
Trump talks differently than other Republicans. So the bottom line of it is Trump is subverting the Democratic electoral majority. Now, the Democrats are hoping that what they lose in West Virginia and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, they will recover through illegal aliens. In other words, they're banking on expanding that ethnic constituency. This is why they say things like Schumer tweets out before the State of the Union, that the Dreamers are the best Americans. In other words, better than the rest of us.
Which is really
Because
offensive.
evidently, we have inadequate dreams. We just don't dream quite as well. Now, in the past, it would be political suicide for any politician to say this. To imply that, let's not even the term illegal immigrants is a misnomer because illegals aren't immigrants.
No.
So the idea that
That's right.
illegal aliens are somehow better and should be the object of political priority over native born Americans,
Yep.
no Democrat would have dared to say this in the FDR era. So something's changed, and the Democrats have changed, and the world has changed. So at the end of the day, I think the Democrats have been stunned by Trump. And they thought it was all going their way. And frankly, had it gone their way, all this stuff that we're seeing now would never have come out. The FBI would be riding high. All of this would have been beautifully covered up. The reason they did it is they thought that they had complete immunity.
Yep.
So Trump is sort of this unbelievable bull in a china shop. And he's knocking stuff all over the place.
Yes.
And these people can't believe it because they think they own the China. So it's very, very entertaining. And from a certain point of view, this American politics is super fun to watch. But I don't know how it's going to turn out. Okay?
What was it like to debate Christopher Hitchens?
Great question.
Debating Christopher Hitchens is a very surreal experience. I think I would say I've debated a lot of different people. I've debated Walter Mondale, I've debated Jesse Jackson, I've debated the head of the Civil Rights Commission. I was at Davos several years ago debating Wole Soyinka, the Nobel laureate. I've debated a lot of different people. Hitchens has been I would say, my toughest opponent. Not because he's necessarily the most intellectually rigorous debater, but because, like Trump, he throws a punch out of nowhere. And it's not immediately evident how to fight back. So he'll say things like, we've done a lot of debates on God and Christianity. He'll say something like, Dinesh, I just got back from North Korea. I met God. His name is Kim Jong-il. He's a tyrant. He goes, but he's not as bad of a tyrant as your God, because even if you live under Kim Jong-il's tyranny, at some point you die. And the tyranny comes to a happy end. But in the case of your God, the tyranny goes on and on and on. And in fact, that's not the bad situation. Hell, that's the good situation. You aspire to it. So now, this is the kind of thing where it comes out of nowhere. And you have to, on the spur of the moment, respond to this sort of semi-deranged, but in a way brilliant, outburst. And so that's Hitchens. And so I always found it
He was an atheist.
really fun to debate him because I had to always think on my feet. And I tried to do the same to him as he would do to me. And it made for a really fun. And the other thing about it is, back to gentlemen's politics, very often after the debate, Hitchens and I sit down, exchange salacious Clinton stories, and polish off a minimum of 2 bottles of wine. So that's the good old days. In that sense, I miss Hitchens.
This next person says, thank you for your bold Hillary movie. I paid my 2 chains to watch it, and they changed their vote the night before the election.
Wow.
That being said, what do you predict the ultimate outcome will be with the Clinton Foundation and the Clintons next?
Well, the Clintons, I'm tired of them. Everyone's
Yes.
tired of them. I say this because this actually is a challenge from a movie maker's point of view. When I made the movie on Obama, in his own perverted way, is very fascinating. And we were able to have a poster on the Obama movie, love him or hate him, you don't know him. Which was true of Obama in 2012, after his first term. With Hillary, you could never say, you don't know her. We know her. The difficulty of making my Hillary movie was this. Nobody wants to sit for 90 minutes and watch Hillary. So how do you make a movie that's interesting about a person who is unceasingly tiresome and annoying?
Evil.
And whose racket is so obvious that it's the only thing you admire is the chutzpah with which it is carried out. So, to me, the big question of 2018 is, will these people who have been, one step ahead of the posse for 25 years, will it finally catch up with them? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm hoping that the answer is yes.
Yes.
Looks like Bill Clinton has actually gotten a little bit sort of singed. This whole Me Too thing is very inconvenient for him.
Yes.
But again, with Hillary, if you listen to her talk about it, she is the most unself-conscious person on the planet. She'll say things like, people have got to be believed. People have got to be listened to and heard. And women. It's unbelievable. So the Clintons are, these are characters right out of Mark Twain. I mean, not since
Yes.
the Duke and the Dauphin were running their unbelievable rackets in Huckleberry Finn.
Wow, that's a great
Have we
comparison.
seen a duo like these two.
And they don't even sleep
We'll see what
together.
happens.
What is your position on Israel and the 2-state solution?
Great question.
Don't claim to know that topic as well as I should. I don't try to be an expert on everything. And what I know about the topic is simply this, and that is that here is little Israel, It's surrounded by hostile states.
Yep.
It seems to be the only functioning state in the region. In fact, even the crimes alleged against Israel, true fact. Israel is so mean, the Israelis basically have been beating up on all of us. Very interesting. There are thousands of you, and so few of them. How did the little Israelis get up, basically pistol whip all the rest of you, dust themselves off, and leave the room? I mean, how did they pull that off? You have to have a very successful society to do that. In any event, I think I support Trump on this. I think Trump is doing what he said, and I think he recognizes that Israel is a valuable ally. This America First thing needs to be thought about for a minute, because I think the insidious thing that's going on is that Trump, you could see this in the State of the Union, is manifestly an American nationalist who is being falsely accused of being an ethnic nationalist.
Right.
The line that Trump is drawing is between the alien and the American. And Trump is essentially saying, I'm going to do what every leader of every country does not even say, because it is the taken for granted premise of every other leader of every country without exception on the planet. The Indian Prime Minister doesn't have to say India first, because every Indian knows that that is his objective. The head of every other country is pursuing their own national interest, and it is only in America that somehow the president is considered to be a bad thing. For the president to stand up for the interests of his own country. That's become controversial. That's very odd.
A lot of your work is centered around criticisms of the Democratic platform. But what is the criticism you have of the Republican Party? What is something they can do better on?
Fair enough. That's a good question.
Historically, the so-called progressive movement of the early 20th century had Democrats and Republicans in it. Now, the Republicans in it were not as bad as the Democrats. So, for example, Teddy Roosevelt was not half as bad as Woodrow Wilson.
Right.
Teddy Roosevelt was, if you listen to him, he says things that do sound kind of racist. He'll talk about race suicide, he'll talk about the white man's burden, but fundamentally, Teddy is a decent guy. And you see it in his actions and his rhetoric. Teddy Roosevelt says, I invited, this is the great black leader, Booker T. Washington, to dinner. He goes, I didn't think about it. I just got the idea. And he goes, and the moment I got the idea, he says, I felt a hesitation because of his color. And then he says, and then I was ashamed of myself for feeling it, and I immediately sent out the invitation without consulting anyone. So this is Teddy.
Wow.
He basically has this sort of racialist ideology. He also knows it's politically inconvenient to do what he's doing. Why? Because he's opening the door to social equality. It's one thing to free the slaves, it's one thing to have the 14th Amendment, but this is the original Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Never before had an African American been invited to a meal to sit down with the president and his family in the White House. Wow. Teddy did that.
Yes.
Wilson was the opposite.
Yep.
Wilson was basically an incorrigible racist. So here's what I'm saying. Is there a progressive Republican tradition that we have to worry about? Yes. Those were the original rhinos. Republicans in name only. They were half Democrats, you might say, but they were in the Republican Party. Now, the Republican Party today has all kinds of problems. Most notably, I would say the biggest problem is that they don't recognize that there is a culture war, and that's the big battlefield, and the political fight is a small part of that battlefield. The Republicans only fight here.
Right.
They ignore this. And as a result, they complain about the media, and they complain about Hollywood, and they complain about the Emmys, they complain about but conservatives don't do the necessary things to infiltrate those institutions, to create alternative institutions, to fight on that ground. Give you a small example. Let's say, for example, you're a young guy in this audience right now who is a great, really funny guy, funnier than Bill Maher, and wants to be a stand-up comedian. Okay? If you're a conservative, how do you do it? Because Bill Maher didn't become Bill Maher overnight. He started out in the improvs, right? He was like the Beatles, 8 days a week. It took him a long time to learn what he did. Well, our team doesn't do that. We have no way for a young conservative. I mean, in America today, politically incorrect comedy would blow the roof off. It's the funniest thing in America because it's the big taboo in America. And yet, no comedians, I mean, there was little hints when Richard Pryor and Chris Rock kind of went into that area, but most comedians will stay away. They're too scared. They're too scared. And that's why their comedy is, well, it's not that funny.
That's right. Jimmy
Because
Kimmel.
it's not that revolutionary. So, the Republican Party, I think, needs to widen its sights.
How do you respond to liberals who say that because Hitler opposed Bolshevism and Marxism, therefore he himself could not be a socialist?
That is of the caliber of saying that because the Shia and the Sunni have been fighting for centuries, they cannot possibly both belong in the House of Islam. In other words, sister ideologies frequently fight over fine points of doctrine, and they compete for followers and for power and territory. Look, I don't deny that Hitler was a German, and a German socialist. The reason Hitler hated the communists is the communists were socialists who took their orders from Moscow. And that's Hitler's point. You guys aren't even Germans. So the fights between the communists and the National Socialists hinged on the distinction between the national and the international. Marx was an internationalist. Marx basically said the working man has no country. And Marx thought if there ever was a fight, the socialist in France would join with the socialist in Britain, would join with the socialist in Germany. Now the reason fascism started is because the Marxists, like Mussolini, didn't think, they saw that that was false. Mussolini went to World War I, and Mussolini opposed World War I in the beginning. But then he fought in World War I, and he said, I saw that the French socialist was fighting for France. And the Italian socialist was fighting for Italy. In other words, Mussolini saw that nationalism is stronger than class. And Mussolini goes, if socialism is ever going to work, it's going to have to be National Socialism. This is the invention of fascism. This is how fascism got started. It was a heresy inside of Marxism. Now again, think about this. We are in an intellectual environment. We're talking about a topic that couldn't be more relevant to our politics and is relatively